Gentlemen, it's been, I'll just say, an historic week in this country. Difficult times. And you all may have read this book, The Fourth Turning by Neil Howe. And there's a co-author too. Strauss is his last name. I can't think of his first name right now. Our friend Brandon Quittem, fellow Swan, wrote a great essay about this called Bitcoin and the Rhythms of History, about this book as it relates to Bitcoin. And the premise of the book is that about every 80 to 100 years, societies face a great crisis. It's the collapse of the old order and the birth of something new. So that would, about 80 to 100 years ago, put us around World War II era, where a lot of new institutions were created in the wake of crumbling old institutions. And here we are now, about 80 plus years later, in a similar situation where violence erupts, assassinations, repression, upheaval. And violence, as history shows, does not kill ideas. It actually tends to spread them and accelerate them. I think there are a lot of people around the world, and certainly in this country, who have been exposed to Charlie Kirk's ideas, for instance, that were not before the tragedy happened this week. So this kind of violence really deepens the cracks in the institutions that are already rotting from within, and it's actually hastening their downfall. Faith in governments and corporations, religions, media, monetary systems are all crumbling under the weight of, and especially the monetary system, as we talk about all the time, under the weight of this endless debt and political corruption. So projects like Bitcoin and Nostr are building a new world based on decentralized open protocols and replacing gatekeepers as the foundation of a new world order, new institutions, decentralized institutions and protocols that will underlie this next turning. So it does certainly feel like a storm is upon us. It's felt like that for many years now. And so the question is, it's not whether or not change is coming, it's coming. It's what kind of world will we gather together and build on the other side of these crisis years, this storm. So we need Bitcoiners now more than ever, guys, to continue to step up and teach and advocate and build for this new world. So I would love to hear if you guys have any comments on this, and we can talk a little bit more about the fourth turning as well. But so yeah, I'll just open the floor and say, welcome to the show. Thanks everyone for joining in and watching today. Happy to watch the chat to see if you guys have any comments to throw up. And yeah, John, I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brady said. And if I have a more somber tone today, it's for all the things you just mentioned and more. Still pretty shocked by the killing of Charlie Kirk and other events, including a stabbing of an innocent girl on a train in Charlotte. There's a lot to say, and I don't think this is meant to be a podcast to unpack and talk about this all. But at the same time, it's probably something that's on nearly everybody's mind. It's certainly been on my mind for many days now. I think you highlighting the fourth turning is appropriate. I will tell people, if you want to learn more about it, you can type in Brandon Quittem's name to your favorite podcast search bar and probably find episodes a dozen times of him talking about it somewhere. He does a very good job.
I'll mention real quick, John, that Bitcoin News, the Bitcoin News podcast, actually interviewed Brandon yesterday.
Okay, there you go.
So you got a fresh one to check out too, the Bitcoin News podcast.
There you go. So if you want the latest, it is very fresh. One thing I'll say is that I do this with older family members a good amount, and it's to discuss, I won't even say debate because it's not even really a debate, but just to discuss this question that I think can go on forever, and it will go on forever, of are times crazier now, or were they crazier at pick your decade in the past? And I'm a kid who grew up in the 90s. I don't think the 90s are thought of as a particularly crazy decade, but even if they were, the reason that an individual can't always evaluate this is because I was not following politics in the 90s. I was following Mets baseball and hockey and whatever else. So I can't really look back and say, even if I read up on the 90s and everything that happened, it's hard to look back and then for me to compare and say, was this crazier than 2025? Because I'm living through 2025. I'm almost 40 years old. Things mean more to me now. I have a family. So you can't always compare as an individual. So a lot of times you have to talk to someone who's older and say, hey, do you think the 60s were more crazy than today? Do you think the 70s were more crazy than today? You could wind back the clock. Obviously, there have been world wars. The country's been through a civil war. There's plenty of people in this country that maybe have a grandparent who left a world war from Europe or some other country that was experiencing it and came to America. That's pretty crazy, right? So you could always wind the clock back and get to something that appears crazier, but the discussion that you're not going to be able to debate with too many people who've been around for World War I or World War II. So the discussion ends up being more like, hey, were the 60s and 70s crazier than today? And I'm not saying to have that discussion because there's a right answer, but I think people should have that discussion just for the sake of having the discussion with your older friends, family members. They can tell you what it was like, even if they weren't even in this country in the 60s or 70s, they could tell you what it was like where they were in the 60s or 70s. I think it gives you perspective. What you do with that perspective, of course, is up to you. And it's just good for the sake of open discussion, which is another reason why I think the Charlie Kirk shooting has gotten me so hard, is that plenty of people could disagree with his views, but there's just endless evidence that he was the guy who would have an open debate with you. And there were even people who, like, he vehemently disagreed with their political views, their lifestyle, their sexual orientation, whatever. They would literally get a microphone, be 10 feet away from him, and he would say something that was like very charitable and friendly. And he would even say, my Christian religion causes me to disagree with your lifestyle or something like that. But it was never, people talk about him inciting hate and things like that. And I just don't think that's backed up by the evidence. And this last comment is a crazy thing to say, or it feels like a crazy thing to say. There have been several attempts to kill presidents, and some of them have been successful. That, I'm not saying that makes it okay, but there's like a historical precedent for this in the US and basically every country on earth. But what makes this week's event so difficult is that this is not somebody who was setting policy and who was elected into office. This is literally a guy who was at an open debate event and got killed in that setting, which is just incredibly a difficult pill to swallow. I'll stop there. I think there's more to say, but I'll stop there.
I will just chime in because this comment just came in on YouTube, and this was exactly where my head was at, from Jim Lynch, just talking about, I think part of the perspective that we have on today's day and age is warped because of everyone having a camera that they can record and then send out whatever they're recording in real time to the entire world. And that, I think, shifts the perspective that, oh my God, there are so many horrible, bad things happening all throughout the world at once, when in reality, back in the day in the 60s, like, what, you got your news from the newspaper once a day, if that, and if the coverage was good enough, it covered enough stories. I think that perspective, it's one that I pay attention to in these types of discussions. And then, John, to echo what you were saying a little bit as well, look, I did not agree with many of Charlie's beliefs, but I appreciated what he was doing. And what he was doing was creating a dialogue between people that sit on an opposing viewpoint. And in today's day and age, we have frankly lost that ability. And I am so grateful that he did what he was doing. And frankly, I hope that more people become emboldened to continue what he was doing, maybe not in a public sphere, but just in their private lives. I think that is the most important thing. And that's what I hope we really like latch onto here. Beyond that, it is, I saw this commentary around it. You know, we had the attempted assassination of Trump. What was that, like a year and a half ago now? And then you have this happen with Charlie Kirk. We're getting to a very uncomfortable and tense place in our country that in my lifetime, we weren't seeing anything of this magnitude. But then again, to point out Jim Lynch's comment, in the 60s, you had JFK assassinated, you had MLK Jr. assassinated, you have the war in Vietnam and protests going on about that on a regular basis. I'm not saying this time is better or worse, anything of the sort. I'm just saying in this cosm that we are right now, for us 90s babies, and then Brady at what year, a 70s, 80s baby, like,
yeah, 79.
For all of us, like, we've not experienced this in our lifetime for the most part. Like to watch presidents openly getting shot at, to watch public figures just getting gunned down in front of their family just for talking, for exercising their First Amendment. I think we're losing the plot a little bit.
I'll keep it short because you guys summed that up really well. I think the way I've thought about it is a lot of the takes I've seen online. I would just hope that this doesn't spread further hate and blaming of one side or the other. The problem is much bigger than sides in politics. There's tragedies all across the world, so it's a human problem, and we have systems that we're working with that are failing people, and that's ultimately where I believe all this strife and anger and hatred comes from. Because if we had systems that allowed everyone to prosper, these types of events wouldn't, maybe they would still occur, but not as often. So that's the only thing I would say is I encourage everybody not to increase the hate, blame one side or the other, have conversations, treat everyone as humans, and no matter what their beliefs are, that's what it is at the end of the day. And we're here to talk about what's going to help us rebuild new systems, right?
Yeah, said, man. And I think that if you have a disagreement with somebody about their ideas, even if you think their ideas are hateful in themselves, what do you want in a society when you have the collision of ideas, directly opposing ideas, and you think that one idea is hateful, the other side might think your idea is hateful? What do you want? You want someone who will sit down and engage with you in good faith and discuss calmly, rationally your ideas, and do so respecting you as a person, even though they may fundamentally disagree with the way you live your life or how you identify. And I had never seen anything from Charlie Kirk. I recognized his face. I couldn't have put the name to the face if I had just seen his face. But I have now watched some of his events, and from what I've seen, he was just that, doing just that, engaging in good faith, even with people who disagreed with his ideas, and not demeaning them as humans because they had an opposing idea. That's the kind of engagement that you want to have in a society where we are blessed with free speech, or at least theoretically blessed with free speech, and in practice quite a bit, actually, compared to a lot of the rest of the world. This idea of the fourth turning, I do encourage everyone to take a look at this book. I will share real quick Brandon's piece, if I can find the right one to show here. Yeah, let's see. Let me flip this. Yeah, so Bitcoin and the Rhythms of History at brandonquidham.com. Just search his name, and he's taken the ideas from this book, and I'll summarize them just a little bit more after this, but he's applied them to a Bitcoin lens as well. So I definitely recommend this. There are podcasts of him talking about this idea as well, but this is a great kind of overview of the book itself, 50-minute read. I think Guy Swan has put it on his Bitcoin Audible podcast. If you're a person who likes to listen rather than read, you can check that out. So the fourth turning basically says there's these four turnings, these four events or sections. They call it a saeculum, which is roughly a human lifetime, 80 to 100 years. And they say that the cycle goes like this. And the first turning is a period of strengthening institutions. This is after the crisis, and declining individualism, followed by a societal crisis. That's the whole idea, right? And during this period, society tends to focus on community, conformity, and collective progress, with optimism and unity prevailing. The second turning is an awakening. It's characterized by spiritual and cultural upheaval, where individualism rises and institutions are challenged. There's a focus on personal authenticity, inner exploration, and rebellion against the conformity of the previous cycle, the previous high, the first turning. The third turning is the unraveling. Institutions weaken further as individualism triumphs, leading to cynicism, fragmentation, and culture of excess. Society experiences cultural decay, with trust in authorities eroding and personal freedoms emphasized. And then the fourth turning, which is where we're asserting that we are now, is the climactic phase where society confronts a major existential threat, leading to the destruction of old institutions and the birth of new ones. Time of peril, mobilization, transformation, often involving war, economic collapse, or revolution. Historical examples include the Great Depression, World War II, the American Revolution, and the Civil War. So the authors predict that America's fourth turning is going to happen right about now, between They predicted in the book between 2005 and 2025, so that 20-year period. And then it goes on to talk about the archetypes of people, the type of people that these 20-year periods generates. So in the first turning, you have prophets, idealists, visionaries, visionary and principled. They lead awakenings and provide moral guidance in crises. The nomad is in the second period, pragmatic and individualistic. They endure unravelings and fight in crises. The hero in the third turning, term-oriented and energetic. They build during highs and sacrifice in crises. And then finally, the artist, the sensitive and compromising. They support during awakenings and manage during highs. So these are the different types of people that these turnings produce. So interesting book. You can check it out. Maybe we can learn from the rhythms of history. And you can read in Brandon's essay about how Bitcoin fits into this fourth turning period that we're in now.
September 30th and October 1st. This is BTC and DC. It's going to be a very cool conference. No disrespect for the really large conferences that are out there. They're cool in their own right. This is going to be a smaller conference with a lot of signal, really good speakers. You'll probably get to chat it up with the speakers. You'll run into the same attendees, get to have really good conversations. So would highly recommend if you can get to Washington, DC, September 30th and October 1st are the two dates of that conference. Check out the speakers if you want to see, but it's going to be Saylor and a bunch of other people speaking there, as well as some potential, lawmakers in the Bitcoin space. And then lastly, the show is brought to you by Mara, world's largest publicly traded Bitcoin miner, keeping the Bitcoin network secure.